All right, let's break down this matchup between these two unranked bantamweight contenders. Let's look at, firstly, we get this fight because Santiago Luna is stepping in on short notice because Bryce Mitchell was originally supposed to face Victor Henry on this fight night card, and unfortunately, Victor Henry pulled out. So Santiago Luna stepped in. So let's look at the tail of the tape. Man, 22 professional fights, the same we saw in the last fight, and when his opponent, eight. Almost triple the amount of mixed martial arts experience, and then he takes his two UFC fights compared to Bryce's 13. Mind you, they are 1 inch height separation, 5'10", 5'9". Bryce is 10 years older than Santiago is 21 years old, has a 4-inch reach advantage, 74 to 70. He has the orthodox stance, and then in Bryce's case, he's southpaw. Now let's look and see what makes Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell such a dangerous contestant. Well, first, he trained with the Barada MMA team in Arkansas. I'm going to stop that. I know it's getting annoying. He came into the UFC back in 2018 when he made his Ultimate Fighter debut on the season with Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic, and here he's getting picked by Team Cormier. He would meet all the way to the semifinals of the tournament and lose third round rear naked choke submission to Brad Katona before the fight can allude to the 3-round decision. And yes, Katona wins, moves on to the finale, would win the Ultimate Fighter finale that season, and would actually win two Ultimate Fighter finales. He's the only fighter to ever win two Ultimate Fighter trophies. Shout out. And let's see, we go back to the first Ultimate Fighter that Brad won in, and in the undercard, Bryce Mitchell would compete and make his UFC debut against fellow tough semifinalist Tyler Diamond. And in this fight, Bryce Mitchell defeats Tyler Diamond, gets his UFC debut under his belt, and now hits the ground running, still undefeated because the fight that took place in the Ultimate Fighter House did not count on his professional record. So he starts his 1-0 career and continues by beating Bobby Moffett by unanimous decision. Very nice. Then he pulls off the fourth twister submission in UFC history by submitting Matt Sales in the second round with a beautiful twister setup. And then he moves on and defeats Charles Rosa at the UFC 249, May 2020 pandemic card, where he beat Charles 30 to 24 on one judge's scorecards. And then he continues on his win streak and defeats Andre Fili by unanimous decision. Very disappointed, but very understandable. And then beats Edson Barboza, former lightweight, top contender and now featherweight contender. And then Bryce Mitchell just took him down. And then he would get his first UFC loss by losing to Ilya Taporia by second round arm triangle choke. And then we all know Ilya Taporia would become the featherweight and lightweight UFC champion, not simultaneously, but very nice. And then he would get back on the winning track by defeating Dan Ige via unanimous decision. Tough fight, but it was what he needed to, in order to get back on the win column. And then he is the number 10 featherweight contender in the world, taking on Josh Emmett, who was ranked number 6. And Josh Emmett sent him and his brain and what's left of his soul, mind you, to the darkest part of the shadowiest hell that is imaginable. And yes, he started seizing on the octagon after this punch and was out of competition for a whole year until he came back and fought Kron Gracie 1 year later at UFC 310 and would knock him out into the shadow realm in the third round via ground and pound because Kron Gracie did what Gracie's does and pulled guard. Got the win back under his belt. But then he would continue, and he's the number 13 featherweight contender and the unranked featherweight contender, John Silva, who is currently number 6 in the world, put him in the bulldog north-south ninja choke I've ever seen in my life. And then when he let go of the choke, Bryce Mitchell was unconscious, ladies and gentlemen. And then he dropped back down to the bantamweight division, which is what he competed in originally in the Ultimate Fighter House, and went down 10 pounds and got his first win over Saeed Nurmagomedov via 3-round unanimous decision, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's look at his best win, shall we? Third best, Andre Touchy Fili. We look at his record that he had before competing against Bryce Thug Nasty, was 3-1 with some good wins if you look at them. beat former lightweight top contender Miles Jury, beat Shaman Rice, knocked him out, ground and pound, got the win very significantly, and then lost to former top ranked featherweight himself, Sadiq Yusuf, and then got a big win back on his shoulders when he defeated Charles Jourdain via split decision. And then we get to his fight with Bryce Mitchell. And unfortunately, the decision did not go touchy-feely's way, and Bryce Mitchell would continue his undefeated streak. And then his second best win fight that came right after this Philly victory, Edson Barboza Jr. Now, here is his record. The former top 5 ranked lightweight contender in the world was 2-1 heading into his bout with Bryce Mitchell in his new weight class, beating former top 15 ranked featherweight Marquand Amirkhani, 3 rounds unanimous decision, and then beating Shane Burgos in one of the craziest knockouts ever. He hits him with this left jab that you all see in this screen, and then you see Shane Burgos just start backpedaling, heading towards the cage, collapsing on his ass, and then Edson Barboza just finishes the job, face first to the canvas. What an amazing knockout victory. But then he would lose himself, and he would get knocked out by Giga Chikadze. Third round punches, TKO. That referee, Jason Herzog, stops the fight. And then we get to Edson Barboza. Back-to-back losses, unfortunately, losing to Bryce Mitchell. Wrestled him, controlled him. That's how Thug Nasty gets it done. And the most impressive victory on Bryce Mitchell's career, Dan 50K Ige. And his record, we see it's a little similar to what Edson Barboza's was similarly. His stretch started with a loss to the currently #1 undefeated ranked featherweight in the world, Movsar Evloev. Then he would knock Damon Jackson out so hard and just walked over his body like he didn't even care. And then he would beat Nate Landwehr by 3-round unanimous decision, which would lead him into his fight against Bryce Mitchell. And Bryce Mitchell, after coming off his first loss to Ilia Topuria, was not going to take back-to-back losses, and unfortunately won the unanimous decision and continued on his winning streaks. And now we get to the reason why is Ige the better opponent than Fili or Edson Barboza? It's because he knocked Andre Fili out into the shadow realm himself and walked over his body after he delivered one last standing TKO ground and pound or knockout. And yes, walked over away like he just didn't even commit a crime. And yes, he defeated Edson Barboza in a very close decision that Barboza thought he won. But 50K took it away himself. So that's why he is the most impressive victory on Bryce Mitchell's career. So now we look at his 8-0 prospect he will be taking on tomorrow night in Santiago, Border Boy Luna. So he trains with Enthron Gym, you see Cheeto Vera up there in the picture with him. Very nice. So he made his UFC debut of a short notice turnaround after getting a first round knockout victory on Tough Enough against Manabat, and then would come in because this fight was so epic and he knocked him out so impressively. The UFC Noche card last year in San Antonio we see Lopez and Silva in the main event, right? Here's what was supposed to be on the undercard. Rob Font was supposed to fight Raul Rosas Jr., which we later saw this year at UFC 326, but this fight was supposed to take place last year. Raul Rosas is unable to compete. So then it becomes David Martinez versus Rob Font, and now David Martinez is the #9 ranked bantamweight in the world. So when this fight got rescheduled, it was because David Martinez was originally supposed to fight Kwang Lee. And now that David Martinez is moving up to face Rob Font, Lee is left without an opponent. So who gets the call to fill in short notice? Of course, Santiago Luna making his UFC debut at UFC Noche. 6-0, mind you, as well. Comes in, wins very impressively, knocks Lee out, gets the crowd on their feet, and you are just welcome to the UFC with an amazing debut. And then he would take on, know this guy's name, know his name. He would take him, I'll look it up later on. But now we get to the prediction, because that's all he has. He has 2 fights, an impressive win at Tough Enough, not even a legitimate regional promotion. And if they are, I've never heard of them. But a man with 22 fights taking on a surging prospect with 8. I think the bantamweight Bryce Mitchell is where he should have been competed all this time. I mean, he was great at featherweight, has hand like a handful of tremendous wins under his belt, but now that he's back at 135, I think this is the weight class that he belongs in. I think he's gonna humble this person has been with the Mexican national wrestling team since he was a child. But I think Bryce Mitchell's gonna just out grapple him. He's gonna try and engage in that similar game, and then he's gonna be outclassed because Mitchell has had so much more experience, has fought way better caliber of opponents. Not even close. I'm going Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell via third round submission.